if you have not heard about attachment styles till date, you must be living under a rock, covered in snow, in the land of Narnia. Okay, not that far, but I'm sure that you must have heard about the 4 attachment styles. The securely attached people, the 3 types of insecurely attached people: dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant, anxious preoccupied. You must have heard about those. But let's explore 5 lesser known, less popularized facts about the attachment styles today. 1. Attachment styles, just like almost every other personality trait, occurs on a spectrum. Let's understand this with a simpler example. A more commonly known personality traits such as introversion and extroversion. Understand this, that introversion and extroversion are the 2 extremes of the same scale of personality trait, right? So when we say that someone is extroverted, what we mean is they are more than 50% extroverted and otherwise introverted. When we say that someone is introverted, what we mean is that someone is that particular person is more than 50% introverted and otherwise extroverted. And I think now you can also understand why we have the concept of ambiverts, who are more or less, let's say, 48-49% or around 50% of introverted extroverted, right? So this would also help you understand why even among the extroverts that you know, there is such a huge variety. Even among the introverts that you know, not all of them are introverted across all aspects of life. There are certain parts of them or certain areas of life, let's say certain situations, where you would be surprised that, oh, I thought they are introverted, but how are they so outgoing and lively in this particular situation? And scientifically, it's not exactly a surprise. It's very much expected and understandable, right? The same goes for attachment styles as well. So all the 4 attachment styles, securely attached, dismissive avoidant, anxious preoccupied, fearful avoidant, all the 4 types of attachment styles, characteristics of all 4 types of attachment styles exist in each one of us. Yes, that's right. So when we say that someone is, let's say, securely attached, it does not mean that they don't have any traits or any percentage of insecure attachment style in their entire personality portfolio, if that is what it can be called. The same way, if we say that someone is a dismissive avoidant, it does not mean that they will not have any characteristics of the other forms of insecure attachment or even of secure attachment for that matter. The same goes for fearful avoidance, the same goes for anxious preoccupied as well. What happens is the percentage of each of these types of attachment styles that we have differs, and what shows up is the most predominant type of attachment style. So if I am a fearful avoidant, which is kind of a mix of anxious preoccupied and dismissive avoidant, then it only means that predominantly I am a fearful avoidant, but that does not mean that I don't have characteristics of dismissive avoidant, anxious preoccupied and secure attachment in my personality. I have those other traits as well, just that they are in a far less percentage than the fearful avoidant characteristics. The same goes for every other attachment style. Which brings me to the next less known, less popularized fact. Attachment styles are predominant attachment style is or shows up in all our relationships across the board and not just in our romantic relationships. You see, what happens is we don't give so much of conscious thought in any of our other relationships as we do in our romantic relationships. We have so many friends, or we have at least 1 or 2 friends throughout our lives, at every phase of our lives. But we don't put so much thought into, am I a good friend? Does my friend like me enough? Am I showing up the way that my friend needs me to show up for them right now? Am I doing enough in this friendship? How am I contributing to this friendship? How is my friend contributing to this friendship? Is there some sort of power struggle here? Am I cared enough for? Does my friend feel cared enough for? we don't put in so much thought in any of our other relationships, even in family dynamics for that matter. I'm not sure how many of us consciously sit down and have this thought process of, do my parents feel cared enough by me, or do my children feel connected enough with me? Is this a good relationship? What is the expectation and intention? Where is this relationship going? We don't think so much, not in our friendships. We never think, where is this friendship going? We never think, what is the mutual intent? We don't think what is the mutual expectation, even in sibling relationships, parent-child relationship, any other relationship, not even in work relationships for that matter. But it is only in romantic relationships that we invest so much of our thought process, so much of our emotions, our mind, our rational capacities, everything, which is why it's very easy to get blindsided with this notion, with this perspective that our attachment style predominantly shows up only in our romantic relationship. That is the only part of our life that we need to work on and fix, for lack of any better word. And all our other relationships are perfectly fine. We show up perfectly in all of our other relationships. Our other relationships, friendships, parent-child relationships, siblings, cousins, workplace relationships, none of our other relationships need any attention, any working at all. That is not true. How we show up in one relationship is in all probability how we show up in all of our relationships, because that is our predominant attachment style, at least in this particular phase of our life. So it's really important to understand that if we want to work on ourselves, the idea is to make an assessment, to take a real honest look into all of our relationship dynamics. How are we as a friend? How are we as a child? How are we as a parent? How are we as a sibling? How are we as a colleague? How are we as a teammate in general? How are we as a neighbor? If we have any close neighbor relationships, as in how are we as a community member? How are we as just an acquaintance when we are not very close friends? Take a look at all of your relationships and then try to understand what is the pattern in which you show up. What is your behavioral tendency? And that is the starting point of how we work, how we start working on ourselves. It's not exactly only about fixing our romantic relationship. That is practically not possible. What we really need to do is understand our behavioral tendency in general, how we show up for ourselves and for others in our lives, what are our existing patterns and what changes do we want and how do we get there. Which brings me to the next point. Attachment styles are not rigid identities. They are fluid. You see, each predominant attachment style that we may have, it might differ across the phases of our lives. Someone with a secure attachment style from their childhood, adolescent, in their early life might go through a really traumatic event and then gradually develop a more insecure attachment style. And vice versa. Someone with a more turbulent early years of life, emotionally turbulent early years of life, who might only have experienced insecure attachment and developed an insecure attachment style, might go through better life experiences and gradually develop a more secure attachment style. It's really important to understand that our attachment style is not a rigid identity, and this, by the way, is true for a lot of our behavioral patterns as well. Of course, core personality cannot be changed, we all know that. However, a lot of our behavioral tendencies, the way we exhibit those core patterns in our personality, there are high chances that with the right kind of help, with enough effort and commitment from our side, we can show up as better for ourselves, for everyone around us, and we can really decide who we want to be as a person, as a friend, as a colleague, as a partner, as a child, parent, sibling, whoever, right? Which brings me to the next point, that just like the quality of our relationships, our relationship dynamics is not solely based on our attachment styles. Yes, that's true. It is really affected and influenced by a lot of other factors in our lives. A person with anxious preoccupied attachment style in one situation, one state of life, one social status of life would show up as anxious preoccupied in a very different way, even as compared to a person with the same predominant attachment style, that is anxious preoccupied attachment style, but in a very different life circumstances would exhibit the characteristics of that particular insecure attachment style in a more or less different way. So it's important to understand that there are not just multiple factors affecting the quality of a relationships, which is why behavioral accountability becomes so much more important. At the same time, there are multiple factors influencing the development of this predominant attachment style in us. It's not only your parents' fault, it's actually no one's fault if you think about it. Tell me one thing. Do you really think that your parents, primary caregivers, elder siblings, grandparents, whoever was the adult in your childhood who was primarily responsible for taking care of you when you were a kid, you really think that they deliberately wanted to induce some sort of insecure attachment style within you so that you walk through life so confused and feeling so dejected and alone and craving closeness and connection but not knowing how to exactly walk through to that? You really think that's a possibility? I don't think so. That's really not the case. No one deliberately induces, as an average rule in this world, no one is really evil enough to induce insecure attachment style in children, no matter their relationship to them. Chances are that the adults in our life were also struggling with their own attachment styles or healing from their own insecure attachment styles, and even they did not know how to connect to us the way they wanted to. Which is why attachment styles can often be transferred from generation to generation. When we talk about breaking the pattern, changing the narrative, being the change, being the adult who you needed but probably didn't have, this is also a part of it. You must have noticed that there are certain families where it seems like secure, resilient bonding is the norm. You must have also noticed certain families where everyone seems to be an avoidant, where everyone pretends that nothing ever happened. You just sleep it off, wake up and pretend like the previous day didn't exist, that moment of discomfort, that moment of hurt, that moment of unpleasantness just did not occur on this earth and it was some other planet, some other world. You must also have noticed families where everyone seems to be so high-strung and anxious and have to be constantly in touch and have such enmeshed identities. And of course, all possible varieties of mixture and different combinations of everything I just described. Because referring back to the previous point that attachment styles occur on a spectrum, right? So understand this, that firstly, there are multiple factors affecting the attachment style that you have developed. It is not only your childhood, it is your experiences throughout life up till this point. Yes, your adult life experiences also matter. Remember, we talked about attachment styles being fluid and not a rigid identity, means that they are very much transferable not transferable characteristics, but what I mean to say is it is possible to heal from an insecure attachment style and become more securely attached, learn to be more securely attached, right? So this is why our adult life experiences are really important. They influence, help us change our attachment styles for better or for worse, depending on the type of experiences that we have. At the same time, does your childhood have a very prominent role to play? Of course, yes, it does. Overall personality development, overall behavioral mapping, your behavioral profile, that is highly influenced by your childhood and your adolescence. Different topic, different video. However, it is also important to note that your childhood is not just your parents. Your childhood is how you have experienced the world growing up. It's your parents, it's your siblings, it's your grandparents, uncle, aunt, every other family member who was living in your house or visiting your house even frequently enough. Even house help if you had any, if there was a nanny to take care of you, and your association with them, her or him, however it might be. If there was anyone else you were close to, maybe a neighbor who you looked up to as a role model, and then how that relationship transpired. Your teachers. Your school life experience has a very central role to play in your, not just in the development of your attachment style, but in your overall personality, behavioral development. Every other association, really, even your parents' workplace associations, if you had working parents and you frequented their workplace often as a child, or maybe their work colleagues came over at home, however it might be, whatever your childhood scenario was. But all of it, every aspect of your childhood has impacted you. And it's not only your parents or your primary caregivers. Yes, that is a central theme. But it does not mean that we can negate the impact of every other experience, every other relationship that you held so much more valuable in your childhood. Which brings me to the fifth and probably the most interesting and least popularized fact about attachment styles. The irony is, the basic need and the basic fear, the fundamental needs and fears of every attachment style is largely the same. It's not like someone who is securely attached never needs assurance in a relationship and does not feel insecure at all. And it does not mean that someone who is insecurely attached or has a predominantly insecure attachment style, behavioral tendency, can never be emotionally regulated in a moment of crisis or conflict in the relationship. As Esther Perel explains it best, every relationship has three common fights. As in, every fight in every relationship is actually for one of the three fundamental reasons. First is power and control, priority. Who is the greater priority in the relationship? Whose priorities matter in the relationship? Who decides the power dynamic of the relationship? Who has more control? Who has more say in anything that happens within the relationship? The second kind of fight is for care, connection, and closeness. It is for trust. Who feels not cared for enough? Who feels like there is a loss of connection and closeness? Who feels like there has been some sort of a breach of trust? We may be saying very different things and very superficial words and phrases and exact gestures and behavior that we want to point out to the other person. But what we are really looking for is an assurance that we can still trust the other person and we are still trusted by the other person. What we are really looking for is to know that the other person still cares for us as much as we care for them. All we are looking for is an assurance that we are still close enough, no matter what we are saying to each other's face. And the third kind of fight is for respect, recognition, being valued. Who feels like they are being disrespected in the relationship? Who feels like their presence is completely dismissed? Who feels like their presence, anything they do, anything they say, their thoughts, their life, their words, nothing matters? Who feels like they are never valued enough? Who feels like everything in the relationship is only about the other person's life and work, and their life and work, they don't even exist in the relationship? And I highly suggest you actually go and read up or watch the original video on this by Esther Perel, of course, because I'm merely just giving out pointers here of this concept. Read this or watch this video and you will realize that this is so true for all of our relationships, romantic and platonic. And yes, platonic relationships are commitment too. Would you expect your parents to just walk out on you? Would your parents really expect you to just break your commitment to them as a child and go out looking for other parents? Do you expect certain level of commitment from your siblings? Do you have certain level of commitment in your friendships? You may not say it, but would it hurt if you're ghosted by your friend, if you're abandoned by your friend, if your friends just walk out on you? Would that hurt any less than if any of this would have happened in a romantic relationship? No, right? Is just as hurtful, because there is a level of commitment, there is a level of expectation, need for priority, care, connectedness, being valued, recognized, respected. All of it is a fundamental need and fear across our relationships, irrespective of our attachment style. So the fundamental need is a need for connectedness, a need for trust, a need for communication of that trust and closeness and connectedness and value and respect within the relationship. And our fundamental fear, irrespective of our attachment style, is mostly a fear of abandonment. Human beings need other human beings. We are wired for closeness, we are wired for connection, we are wired to live with people in whatever capacity. We may find our own solace in any and every kind of relationship. That is a personal choice. But human beings need other human beings. And this is what makes it so much more interesting, that irrespective of our attachment style, even if we are securely attached, we don't want to be just walked out on in the blink of an eye. We do need assurance of being close enough, connected enough, trusted enough, being able to trust enough. If we are insecurely attached, whether we are a dismissive avoidant or an anxious preoccupied style, attachment style, we have the same fear largely, that is the fear of abandonment. We crave for the same fundamental need, that is the need for closeness and connection. The difference is not in our needs and fears so much as the difference in how we express our need and fear, how we act upon our needs and fears, how we communicate our needs and fears to the other person. So it's interesting to know this, because it helps us to understand that in order to build closer relationships, in order to build healthier relationship dynamics, we don't need to sit down and take an attachment style test together. Okay, maybe that too. Personality tests always help us to get to know each other better. I'll give you that. But here's the thing. What we really need, more than assessments and tests and personality profiling in intimate relationships or in personal relationships in general, what we really need is to understand, what am I feeling underneath? What exactly do I need in this moment? Do I need to be prioritized? Am I looking for my priorities being met? Am I feeling rejected, neglected? Do I need to be assured that I am cared for? Am I looking for an assurance that I am still important in this person's life? Or am I looking for recognition? Am I looking for validation? Not social validation, but just a very intimate moment of validation that I still matter as much to this person. Or what is it that I fear? Do I fear that I'll be left alone? Do I fear that I will be abandoned? Do I fear that my trust will be broken in some way? Do I fear that I will not be trusted? What is it that I fear? And why? And now that I know what I really need and fear in this moment, how am I communicating it to the other person? How can I communicate my fundamental needs and fears in a more respectful, compassionate, calm, healthy, without blaming and shaming, without guilt tripping ourselves or each other? How can I communicate this in a very understanding, kind, empathetic way? Now, of course, will I be able to do this all the time? Of course not. Everyone's human. But can I at least try to do this most of the time? And can I also expect the same from the other person most of the time? And when the other person is telling me something, am I only listening to their words, gestures, body language, reading the non-verbal cues, their behavior, attitude, or am I really listening to their underlying needs and fears and trying to understand what is this person really looking for? Are they looking for validation? Are they looking for recognition? Do they want to be acknowledged, feel valued? Do they want assurance of trust and care? Do they want their priorities to be met? Do they want to be prioritized? What is it that they are looking for? It really shouldn't take behavioral assessments to build better relationships. Is that helpful? Of course it is. That's the whole purpose. Beyond behavioral assessment, beyond professional help, maybe all it takes is a little moment of pause and a little moment of even hindsight awareness, sincere apology, and making a value-based decision of, do I prioritize this person? Do I prioritize the relationship? Or do I prioritize my feelings in the moment?